Hey folks, just wanted to preface this by saying this is a for fun deck. It's a bit weird, but I figured that since we haven't fully got all the X-Antibody support yet, I thought I'd have a bit of fun with it, so I decided to splash a bit of blue into my build. And I'm going to go through how that works. So let's begin with the deck overview. Here we have the current build of the deck, and I don't think I want to be adjusting it much from this current state until we hit BT8, at which point I'm going to transition it into a proper X-Antibody deck. But as you can see, it's quite a weird one. We are running 4 Digi-Eggs, 14 Rookies, 9 Champions, 7 Ultimates, 6 Megas, 1 Level 7, 8 Option cards, and 5 Tamers. So let's go to the card by card. Up first is our Digi-Egg 4 copies of Darugamon. This has the effect, during your turn, when one of your effects places a Digivolution card under this Digimon, draw 1. This is very good for our X-Anti synergies because anytime we place a card from our hand underneath one of our X-Antis, we are losing a resource in hand, and this can help to mitigate that by drawing us a card every time we do so, which is why I only run the 4 of these. I have seen some people running 5 eggs, running a Aggraman as the 5th one, but I find that the consistency of having 4 Doraemon is just that much more valuable. Up next is 2 copies of Toy Aggraman. This has the inherited effect of Reboot, so you unsuspend it during your opponent's unsuspend phase. This is very helpful because it prevents your Megas or any Digimon you have on the field from being swung over. So definitely very good to have. Next is 2 copies of Chikurima. This has the effect that if you hit it in security, you can de-Digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon. So it's good for getting rid of one of their higher level threats, at least temporarily, or if it's a one-off, it's gone entirely. And yeah, it's just another black level 3, so when we do draw into it, we can just Digivolve it and get a draw. Up next is 4 copies of our main level 3 Darugamon. On play, you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. You can add an X-Antibody and a Coda Demoto among them to your hand, and place the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is very good for getting into your teamer. Doesn't always hit, but whenever it does, it's a great advantage for the deck. And it also has the inherited effect, during your turn once per turn, when one of your effects places a Digivolution card under it, gain a memory. And that can also apply to itself, so if you place a Doraemon underneath one of your Digimon, you do gain the memory from that Doraemon, so it is very good if you have a way to put sources underneath, just to gain back memory on that. Next up, 4 copies of Promo Sonorizamon. And for the longest time, this was a really hard card to get. Like, I searched on eBay and couldn't find any of them at one point. And I don't mean for a reasonable price, I mean literally nobody was selling them. During your turn, all of your black Digimon with 13,000 DP or more gain piercing. So this is very good, especially because the main mega of the deck tends to be very high in DP. So it's good to have that piercing. And inherited effect, during your turn while this Digimon is black and it's 13,000 DP or more, it gains security tech +1. So yeah, so it's good for adding in some extra checks, which this deck is pretty reliable at doing. And our last rookie is 2 copies of Madoki Betamon. Now, back when this was a pure black X-Anti deck, I was running Chumon in this spot, but I figured that since I was splashing in the blue, one of the good ways to do it would be to add this as my memory blocker instead of Chumon, because it gets a blue body on board. And it works fine, not really too much to say, it's a typical memory blocker. Our first champion is 3 copies of Nanimon, and I cannot recommend this card enough. You can also run Shademon, it's equally as valid. They both have the security effect. At the end of the battle you can play it without paying its memory cost. Shademon is a blocker and it can't attack, so that might prove to be more valuable. But for me, it's hard to turn down the 3 play cost of Nanimon as a champion. So even if I don't draw into a rookie, he's pretty cheap to play and get started from there. Up next is 2 copies of Grumblemon. This is your typical black hybrid, 2 to Digivolve into and can Digivolve from a tamer. This is basically just your finishing blow after you've wiped out all of your opponent's security. Digivolve a tamer into this and swing for game. And our final champion is 4 copies of Darugamon. This is an X-Antibody, and it has the effect during your opponent's turn while you have another X-Antibody in its traits in play, or an X-Antibody in its traits in its Digivolution cards, it gets blocker. So it is pretty good. I don't think it gets as good until BT8, whenever you can have Ryudamon underneath it to have a decoy blocker. But sometimes you do need the blocker, and this card is very good for that. It also has the effect, during all turns, while it has X-Antibody in its traits, it gains plus 1000 BP. And that doesn't sound too good, but I have found that this has saved me quite a lot, especially because it is an all turns increase, which makes it harder for the opponent to swing over whatever's on top. And that has saved me a couple of times. Moving on to our ultimates, we are running 3 copies of Volcanomon. This has the inherited effect, during your turn while your opponent has an unsuspended Digimon in play, it gets security attack +1. And that's sort of the theme of what we're going with the level 5s, is both of them give a security attack increase. If we get into a level 6, we're swinging for a minimum of 2 checks, and that's not accounting for if we put another one underneath, or if we have a Sonorizamon at the bottom. And our main level 5 is 4 copies of Darugamon. This has the effect when Digivolving, you can place a black X-Antibody in its traits from your hand to the bottom to prevent effects when bleeding it or reducing its DP until the end of your opponent's next turn. And I find that's very good if you bring it out of the raising area, Digivolve into it, get the protection, Digivolve into your Mega, then your opponent can't touch the Mega during their next turn, and then you swing off in your next turn after that. It's definitely a very valuable protection effect. And it can also trigger some of the combos. For example, your Doraemon, it will give you a memory. Doraemon will draw you a card, or you could place another one of these underneath. Its inherited effect is while it has X-Antibody in its traits, security attack +1. So there have been times where I have Digivolved into a Doraemon and then placed another Doraemon underneath. And then whatever I Digivolve into after that is capable of swinging for 3 checks. Our first Mega is 2 copies of Alphamon. Whenever this gets hit in security, you add it to your hand, and then if you control a Royal Knight or X-Antibody Digimon, up to 12 of your opponent's Digimon can attack players for the turn. So this is very good if your opponent has a wide board, and this is the first thing they hit into, that entire board is shut down for the turn. I only run 2. I see a lot of lists running 3, but I thought I would rather drop an Alphamon than drop our other Mega. To fit in the blue package, and I am planning to up this to probably 4 whenever we get access to the BT8 stuff. But yeah, for the time being, only 2. When attacking, you can pay up to 5 memory. If you do, it gets plus 1000 BP for the turn for each memory paid. So it's quite small, it's only 11,000 if you don't have a Darugamon underneath to give it a buff. So this is usually a very safe thing to do, is to pay a couple of memory to just make it bigger, make it 13,000, 14,000, and then it'll be able to delete anything apart from a level 7 in security, which is fine, especially in the BT7 format where not a lot of decks are running level 7s. And then finally, end of attack, gain 2 memory. So it effectively gives you back 2 of the memory that you paid. If you didn't pay any memory, you want to take that risk, or you want to swing over an opponent's Digimon, that's just 2 free memory for attacking. But our main Mega of the deck right now is 4 copies of Dora Koramon. This has the effect, during your turn, for each card with X-Antibody in its traits, it gets plus 1000 BP. Typically when I swing in with this, it has 16 or 17,000. So I often make the joke that they may as well have just given this card jamming during your turn. And when attacking once per turn, you can place a card with X-Antibody in its traits from your hand to the bottom, and delete up to 2 of your opponent's Digimon with play cost less than or equal to this Digimon's Digivolution cards. I don't think that's very well worded. I feel like they could have done a better job explaining how that effect works, because I have had to explain it to quite a few players. But essentially, whenever you use this effect, you count the number of Digivolution cards this has, and then you can delete up to 2 of your opponent's Digimon whose play costs are less than that number. So it's very good for removing small things. Even by the time you get into it, you're probably clearing 5 or 6 costs, especially if it manages to stay out on board for long and you start to clear out bigger and bigger things. Very strong removal effect. And lastly is 1 copy of Omnimo XAntibody. And I know I'm probably getting some weird looks for this. I initially added this as a joke, but I was able to get it out one time. So it sticks around for the jank. You can digivolve into it from a Digimon with Omnimon in its name for 3 cost. We are not going to do that. We don't have any Omnimon to digivolve into it. When attacking, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with DP less than or equal to this Digimon's DP. That's very good. When you attack, you can remove something with 15,000 or less. And during the opponent's turn, whenever an opponent's Digimon attacks, you may trash 2 of this Digimon's Digivolution cards to end the attack. And you might be wondering why I play this. This seems to have no synergy at all with the rest of this deck, and you'd be right. But for the fun of it, I decided to add it in. And if you're looking at the deck list, you can kind of see where I'm going with that. But we'll come back to that in a sec. We're running 2 copies of Ironfisted Onslaught, and if you ask me, this is probably the best removal option that Black has right now. Ultimate Flare I find isn't too good in the BT7 format because you'll just turn a hybrid back into a teamer and not really much else. So I find the 8 memory is better spent on an Ironfisted Onslaught. If I had room, I'd maybe add a 3rd one of these, but for the time being, 2 is fine. Next is 2 copies of Black Memory Boost. Whenever you play this, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, add a black Digimon from among them to your hand, and place the rest on the bottom. And then you place this card in your battle area, and from your next turn, you can destroy it to gain 2 memory. Increases the consistency of your deck, because you can just search for the pieces you need, and you can gain your memory back next turn, so it's a good way to stockpile memory until you need it for a play. And next up is the card that made me want to put this build together. It is 4 copies of Kaiser Nail. Whenever this is played, you can choose a Digimon and play one of its Digivolution cards as its own Digimon. And now you see why I'm running Omnimo XAntibody in this. You can place it with Dora Koramon's effect underneath, or Dora Koramon's effect, and then play this and get the Omnimo XAnti out from underneath. You could also get out another Dora Koramon with this effect, another Alphamon. There's even been occasions where I've played this to get out a Darugamon because I need a blocker. Provides a lot of utility in this deck, actually, surprisingly. You can play out the Darugamon to get another search. But yeah, there is a lot of things you can do with this in this deck. For our teamers, we are running 3 copies of Coda Demoto. This is the sort of dedicated X-Anti teamer in BT7. It is a memory teamer, and whenever you play him, you reveal the top 4 cards of your deck and add an X-Antibody to your hand and place the rest on the bottom. Not really much to say. He is a bit like Davis, a memory teamer that searches, but his search potential is a lot narrower than Davis's. Yeah, he does fine for this deck. If you want to run another black teamer, I'd recommend running Izzy or the dual teamer Izzy and Joe. I think it's fine without them right now. And the last card of the deck is 2 copies of Matashita from Starter Deck 2. And this is a weird one. I initially added it to the deck because it was a cheap teamer, but I found that this Starter Deck mat actually works really well in this deck. Because a lot of the matchups you're going to go up against, blue hybrid, well, really any hybrid match, they're going to be playing Pokemon, they're going to be playing their memory blockers, their reduced blockers, and this just gives you extra memory at the start of your turn if they have one of those. Very solid card. Kind of a surprising one to me, honestly. I didn't expect it to do as much as it does for this deck, but being able to have that extra 2 starting memory, if you have both of these out, it actually makes the deck a lot better. So yeah, that is my blue and black X-Antibody list. Not an awful lot of blue. Mainly just the same as what you'd see in any X-Anti build, but with a bit of spice added in. It's a bit janky, but it is a very fun deck to play, and it got me top 3 at my locals, so can't really complain. But if you've any other deck lists you'd like to see, leave them in the comments below, and thank you for watching.